what tonight's about is trauma-informed care. And so a couple statistics I had learned while you're grabbing that and coming back to your seat is 80% of the children coming into care will end up being given a health disorder as anxiety or depression, many eating disorders. One of the things that we learned in 1 or 2 classes about hoarding, right? And so these are things that as a foster parent, we're like, hoarding, what would that, and then the teacher would explain, well, if they were taken out of a home where they were only given whatever, 1 granola bar a day, right? Or 1 piece of bread a day or some insane thing that we just can't imagine. Well, imagine now they're in your house and there's a pantry and there's a fridge. So they're hoarding. And if you were to see that at RSK or in youth group, which is, again, it's going to be more and more likely because of the awesome number of kids in care and Rock of Grace families, which is amazing. By the way, there's 7 certified families at Rock of Grace. How cool is that? So cool. So, if you were to see that, instead of being like, hey, kid, put those snacks down, not that you'd yell, hey, kid, but, you would just, the idea of tonight is to approach each of those moments slower, right? And to think, oh, I wonder, this might be a child, this might be a teenager who just came into care, who just came out of a traumatic situation, and so I'm going to handle this delicately, right? I'm going to maybe ask some questions. I'm going to give options instead of saying no. See, I've been paying attention to the classes. Can you tell? Hey, what if we put these treats over here for later and you can have one now? Do you learn how to compromise? These different things. Dee Dee's going to talk more about it, but I just wanted to share some heart with you. Again, I know I shared this. It's been a few months since I've shared this vision from the pulpit, but we have this crazy idea that Christians, that believers can become disciples, right? So believers agree. Disciples obey. Believers say, yes, I agree. Somebody should do something about that. But actual followers of Christ say, I'll do something about that. And so the vision that we've cast is that through church planting and networking with other churches, partnering with organizations like NOAS and TCCS, we can see these kids taken care of. And we believe every child deserves a safe and loving home. And so that's why you see me post about this probably once a week with this hashtag every child. That's why we give you T-shirts. We're not going to give you a church. You each get a church? No. You each get a T-shirt. Huh? Because we believe every church, every child deserves a safe and loving home. So the book of James says true religion, true faith, right, is caring for the widow, caring for the poor, and taking care of the orphan. Psalm 65 says that God places the lonely in families. And God has placed a lot of lonely kids in families at Rock of Grace. That's beautiful. What we want you to know, though, tonight is when they come into care, it's not like, woo, all the problems are solved. There's a lot of behavioral things that go on, and we want to approach those things very sensitively, right? So I'm going to also share, I'm going to start off with sharing after that scripture a little bit about active listening, because while I was seeing this last week at a training at, I think it was NOAS, because they partner together, I was thinking, oh man, I read this in a leadership book one time. And so just, if you got your phone, or most of that handout is just for you to take home, but if you got your phone or a pen in the seat, in front of you, and you want to jot down some things about active listening, this is what applies to kids in care. But guess what? I thought I would share this one because this applies to your marriage. This applies to your team at your place of work. So a couple tips, active listening. That kid is acting out. Instead of going up and, just telling them what's going to happen, we want to listen. So we want to ask better questions. When we're listening, we're not going to fill in what we think they're going to say. We're not going to finish the sentence. And we're not going to assume we know what they need. And we're not going to assume we know what they mean, right? We're not going to assume that when they start talking, we know what they're trying to say. We're actively listening with the intent of understanding. All the wives look, just elbow your husband right now. Just pay better attention. So here's some blocks to active listening. Our thoughts race ahead of the speaker. And when they say speaker, again, this could be a 13-year-old that just came into care and youth group. And Jen Kitzmiller or Missy Crisp is listening to them. Maybe arguing mentally with the speaker. Maybe you're already thinking, oh, this girl's just misbehaving. I just can't believe. And in your mind, you're doing that. Well, you're not actively listening, right? And I would even argue as a Christian, we're not actually loving then in that moment, right? We're prejudging. So what we're going to do is actively listen. So arguing mentally, we don't look while we listen, right? So if a teenager is in youth group, and this is, again, a new teenager, and they're maybe misbehaving, they're not paying attention during the sermon, instead of Jeremiah or Jason thinking, oh, that's a bad kid, we're not thinking that. We're thinking when we talk to them later and we're asking about their day, we're asking about their family, we're not thinking in our mind all the reasons they're bad. We're just genuinely loving them and let their behavior change in time as God works on their heart. Right? Everybody say amen? All right, number 4, we don't fake attention thinking about other things. So we don't look at our phone. We don't do anything. When that child who's 8 years old in RSK, I think it's one of Christine's probably top 10 commandments, right, is not to be like looking at the phone while you're in RSK. This very much applies to a kid that just came out of neglect. Our emotions kick in, number 5. Number 6, interrupting frequently. And number 7, we want to jump in to offer advice. Now, that could probably be potentially harmful and take a little bit of fire and put gas on it when you're going to try to tell that kid what to do when, again, they could have just came out of either abuse or neglect. So what you want to do is take each of those situations a little slower, right? Prayerful, sensitive, empathetic, truly listening. Amen? So I thought I would also just share super quick, about how we even ended up in this place. God put it on Danielle had always wanted to foster or adopt, I should say, and she had mentioned it a couple times, but it wasn't like one of these once a month or even once a year things. She just mentioned it a few times in her marriage, and I always thought, oh, maybe in the future, But then we had 4, and I was like, that's 4 no more. It was like, that's good. But God started really speaking to both of us. Danielle even caught me a few times, like I could be listening to Chris Tomlin or Kirk Franklin. I'd just be crying. The word father in there. So I'm like, oh, the babies. I'm crying. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening to me. So it was like this God thing. And then what really pushed us over the edge to do this was our friend Carrie had come through the door. And some of you guys know that story. She had this little baby, and we're like, we want him. And Danielle's like writing a letter to the judge. She's like, we want this baby. And we weren't even finished training yet. She's like, we're pastors. I'm like, that's not how it works, honey. Doesn't matter. You can't just drop the pastor card. You still got to go through the training. She's like, but this baby's so cute. So I'm like, well, I don't give them away on cuteness and pastor cards. But anyway, we're just excited to be in this journey because having Lucas has taught us so much about the Father's love. And then we've had a number of these other kids. We're talking to Heather on the way here, a friend of ours that just got another baby in care. And we do respite for each other. And guess what? Every time we care for these kids, they all have different needs. And again, I'm just trying to give you some like 20,000-foot view ideas here. They all have different needs. In fact, how many of you have more than one child? Or just raise your hand if you have children, I guess. If you have more than one child, okay, right? All right, now keep your hand up if they're different. Okay, raise your hand higher if their needs are very different, right? So, how much more so the child that just came into care that he wasn't allowed to shower only once a month, or you're only allowed to eat once a day, or you can't have a bed, you don't deserve a bed, or whatever. I mean, the things that these kids have heard is just heartbreaking. And so when they come into our church It's not that we just want them to feel love in the foyer and in the lesson for the day or in the small group, but in the moments that are difficult. That's what I'm thinking through tonight, is that, you know, Johnny is misbehaving, and what do you do when you come over to talk to Johnny, right? The things you're not doing and your disposition, the things you're not saying, the better things to say. That's what we kind of want to go through. Last thing I want to mention before I give it to Dee Dee is this. It's funny that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, you've probably heard of this before, that the top one is like, comes out of self-actualization, so fulfillment, creativity, and meaning. Well, that stuff doesn't even cross the mind unless your basic needs are met, right? Like food and shelter and water. So how many of you guys have food, shelter, and water? Raise your hand. How many of you didn't even think about it this morning, right? You just opened the fridge and you just ate. That's not the case with a lot of the kids that came into care. When we say into care, it means they were pulled from their home for the reasons of like safety, right? And then into Trumbull County Children's Services. So if they say into care, I say into care. That's what that means. And they're really just thinking, am I going to be safe? So they go into survival mode. And how many do you think, if you went into survival mode, you might start behaving differently, right? So with all that in mind, I want to give it over to Dee Dee. But before we do, we got a little prize for you, because you got to know, I'm all about prizes. You ever heard the book Love? She said, me too. She's like, okay. Come on up here. I got both of you. I got a gift for both of you. Do you love T-shirts? Well, there you go. That's our Every Child T-shirt. Come on down. The price is right. The price is right. Okay, and I just picked like different sizes. Pick whatever you want back there. Dee Dee, we just want you to know, when you guys are taking care of kids, we believe you're taking care of God's kids. Every one of them is made in God's image. I didn't know your name, so you're just the blank helper on that card, you know. But Jesus knows your name. Come on, somebody. And this cheesy little thing to hold like books up or something on your desk. Life takes us to unexpected places. And how many of those kids have, right? And love brings us home. Come on now. Yeah. Yeah. Give a hand to Dee Dee. Oh, did I knock your glasses off? Oh, wait. One more thing. You guys can fight over this. I don't know who likes Permani Brothers or Chipotle better, but I'll let you go together. Go together. All right, one more time. Give them a hand, guys. When she's teaching tonight, maybe jot down a question, because when she's done, we're going to have a question and answer time, so I don't want you to lose train of that thought of what that question was. So keep your phone or a pen handy and jot down any questions that you have tonight. And if I could I ask you to come up here, because we're going to record, and the video looks a lot better up here. Thank you.
You got it. If I look better on the video, I'm good with wherever you want me to be. Thank you for asking me to come in Brooklyn. My name is Dee Dee Prezioso. I am the supervisor of foster care and kinship care at Children's Services. And so my job is licensing and maintaining foster homes, and my team places the children when they come into foster care. So do I just let you know, Tim, when to advance? Okay. We got the PowerPoint up, which was a little scary because it wasn't going to, but we made it work. So I'm going to talk about the effects of childhood trauma and really what our kids go through, how it changes them, because it does. What are the common things they see? How does it change them? You know, Jordan said that they are in survival mode, and that is so very true, because they can't. They are focused on those basic needs, and they're not met. And if you're born into a loving, nurturing home, you learn as an infant that this big person comes when you cry, right? A big person comes and they do everything they need to. It's a guessing game at first, right? Are you wet? Are you hungry? What do I need to do to calm you? But we do all that because we're nurturing parents. And then we learn to calm. And then guess what happens? We get hungry and we cry again. And the cycle just continues and continues. But what we learn in a nurturing environment is we can trust big people because they meet our needs on a very consistent, regular basis. That doesn't happen for our kids. They learn that this world is not only can we not trust big people, but we can't trust the world at a larger level. So that sets them up for a much bigger challenge than if we come from a nurturing environment. So I'm glad I kind of wanted to, because that wasn't in the PowerPoint, but I thought that's really important to say, because they're not thinking, they're sitting in school not thinking about, oh gosh, how do I spell that spelling word? I really want to do well on that spelling test. They're thinking about, is my baby sister okay? Is mom going to be awake and coherent when I get home? Like, that's what they're thinking about. So understanding where their minds are really does help us work with them. So let's talk about some of what they go through and some of what we see as a result of that. Next one, Tim, please. So this is an analogy of typical Tyler. Typical Tyler is from a nurturing home, right? He's had his needs met. Doesn't mean he hasn't been through some stuff, because that's life, right? We all go through some stuff. It makes us resilient and stronger, but no trauma symptoms, no major traumas. But Buddy Love has been through it, right? So Buddy Love has had significant trauma symptoms, or he displays them because he's had things happen, like multiple moves in his life. He's had been exposed to domestic violence. He was removed from his home due to safety issues, placed into foster care, moved around in foster care, reunified with his family maybe, but then they still had issues. Financial times get hard. They didn't always have food. So he's had a lot of trauma. So here's the thing, next slide, please, about we talk about complex trauma, and what our kids see is complex trauma, because when we talk about trauma, like I said, even typical Tyler's probably had some trauma, right? We all do in our life at some point. Maybe he fell on the playground, had stitches, and that's traumatic for a kid to go through that. But that's entirely different than complex trauma. Complex trauma is what our kids come in with. It's multiple events of trauma. It's the domestic violence combined with the substance abuse, combined with the mental illness in the family. Transiency is often common among our families. Complex trauma is when it happens at a young age. And the reason that's critical, I'll explain in a minute, but what we see are those very profound effects then. The young age is because when we are young, we are building the foundation of attachment. Through that cycle I just talked about, our needs are met, we go back into a calm state, we get aroused, our needs are met, and it's just a cycle that we learn to trust through. When that isn't there, then what happens is that foundation that sets us up for success and growth isn't there. It's like the foundation of a house. If you're building a new house and you have a good foundation, then the rest is going to go up pretty smoothly. But when there's a huge crack in that foundation, you're setting yourself up for major issues for years to come. And that's what our kids experience, is they have a very cracked foundation, so to speak. And that's through complex trauma. So when you look at typical Tyler and Buddy Love, chronologically, they may both be 8 years old, right? But here's next slide, please. What we see, and we talk about development in 3 domains. So there's a cognitive domain, and that's your thinking. That's your brain and how it processes information. It's how you problem solve. It's your everyday, it's your language. It's school. It's how you learn. There's your physical domain, and that's your fine and gross motor skills. That's your running, your jumping, your cutting with scissors, your pinching, all of those things, feeding yourself. That's your physical domain. And then we have our social and emotional domain. That's how you interact with others. That's how you respond emotionally to any given situation. So those 3 domains are really important. So if you look at typical Tyler and Buddy Love, typical Tyler is 9 chronologically. He's also 9 physically. He's also 9 cognitively, and he's 9 social and emotionally. Don't get me wrong. There clearly are cases where kids who don't have trauma have developmental delays. That, we all know that. But that's aside from trauma. That's usually genetic or just born with that developmental delay. But what trauma does is absolutely causes delays in all of those domains. So if we have Buddy Love, who has had all that trauma, cognitively or chronologically, he's 9, but physically, maybe 7 years old. Social and emotionally, probably half his age, probably about 4 years old. And then cognitively, usually about 2 years behind at least, we see our kids. When our kids, especially our school-age kids, come into foster care, they're on average 2 years behind where they should be because of all the moves, because they're not focused on schoolwork. They're focused on survival. So cognitively, there's usually some delays there. Many of our kids are on IEPs in schools and have learning plans. But the social and emotional, that's where we see our behaviors. That's that domain. And I always tell, I've told many parents that if you take a traumatized child's chronological age and you divide it in half and you think of their behaviors in terms of that, that's generally where you'll see. We're like, oh my gosh, you're right. He is acting like a 5-year-old. That's pretty typical for a 5-year-old. That's right, because that's where he is social and emotionally. You'll see those children tend to gravitate towards children who are more in that age range where they are developmentally, not chronologically. That's what we see. That's a direct effect of trauma, our delays in those 3 domains. What we really work with our families on in training is identifying where delays are. Because the more we know about, okay, I definitely see, maybe you take Buddy Love and you put him in soccer. And you think, oh, okay, this is going to be great, right? And then you see quickly, like physically, oh my, he can't do the things the other kids do. So the clearer you can be communicating with a provider about there's a physical, delay there, or social and emotionally, and identifying this is what I see in that domain, that's going to be able to get us the help that he needs, or get Buddy the help he needs, and us put effective interventions in place to get them caught up chronologically. Because there is good news. We can heal trauma. We know that. Here's 2 things that I think are really, really critical to understand with our kids. Number one, we have this perception that we're obviously, if they're coming into foster care, it's because there's safety concerns, right? We're not going to leave them. And that's our number one job, is to keep kids safe. So when we go out to any situation, we are looking at safety first and foremost. How can we secure safety? Our first option is always to try to leave them in the home and put in services to maintain them in the home so that they don't have that trauma of removal. Next would be with a kinship provider, a relative, someone who's familiar with them, but in that home, in a different home, but with someone familiar. The last resort is foster care, bringing them into a complete stranger's home. Because despite everything going on in their birth home, maybe there's addiction. Many of our homes, there's addiction, mental illness, transiency, domestic violence. Sometimes there's all of those things. The number one trauma they face is trauma of removal and coming into foster care. Because despite all that, they love their families. Make no mistake about it. They absolutely love our families. And I think sometimes that's hard for us to wrap our brains around, because we think, oh my gosh, this is great. We got them out of an unsafe environment. And that is good, because we want them to be safe. But we lose sight of the fact of how much trauma that puts them through. So we're always thinking, how can we reduce the trauma? How can we minimize this as much as possible, despite having to do a removal? And those are hard. I do a lot of emergency team work too, which I'm actually on right now. So if my phone rings, it is on only for that reason. So and because it's broke, the volume won't turn off, but whatever. I don't know what's going on. I'll cave and get a new phone eventually. But it's really important when we go out that we're always trying to minimize trauma in that moment. So that was the number one. And then the number 2 thing so number 1, trauma of removal is our number 1 trauma our kids face. Number 2 is that the most powerful way to overcome trauma is through meaningful connections. That's it. The number 1 way to heal trauma is through meaningful connections. It doesn't have to be with a parent. There was this Bruce Perry, Dr. Bruce Perry. If you guys have not heard of him, he's a trauma expert and he's phenomenal. So if you're into reading about stuff like that, Bruce Perry is amazing. So I went to see him speak, and every one of us I just talked to Brooklyn about this. She just had her trauma aha moment where we all go, oh my gosh, trauma changes kids' brains. Like, this is a different ball game. It is different. It's a huge aha moment when you have it. So I was sitting in Dr. Bruce Perry's training, and I had my aha moment. But then he said this, and this was my aha moment about how powerful connections are. He had this young man that he was working with, and this little boy had been in the foster care system and had significant trauma. He had trauma before he came into care, continued to have trauma while he was in foster care, bouncing from home to home to home. And he was at school, he was bullied. He was not, didn't have many friends. He had a lot of social and emotional delays. So he always sat by himself at lunch. And this maintenance, one of the maintenance crew that was always in the cafeteria at lunchtime would just go over and sit with him and just gradually, slowly built conversation. Dr. Perry does what's called brain mapping, and he actually does this amazing thing where he can basically do, hook kids up to whatever machine. I'm a social worker. I don't know what that's called, but he can light up their brain and see where the trauma actually has damaged the brain. So he was doing this with this little boy and working with him. And as this relationship with this maintenance guy developed, and he took him under his wing, they built this friendship. And then the guy became licensed to get this kid. His brain healed, and he overcame his trauma unlike anything he'd ever seen through one meaningful connection. That's what you can do for our kids. And that's what we see happen in foster homes that love these kids and embrace them. And we watch kids heal from trauma, and it's amazing because that's what they need. So trauma removal is the number one trauma, but the number one way to overcome it is through meaningful connections. That's really, really important. Next slide, Tim, please. So when we talk about our trauma, that E's not supposed to be down there.
That's what happens.
Yeah. Okay, let's go with that. It wasn't my mistake. Yeah, it's creative. It's trauma response E. So anyway, so here's what happens with our kids. They have trauma responses because they've been traumatized. So they start to respond to that because they're in survival mode. That's key in this. So what happens is an event will happen, right? They're going, along, going through their day, and something happens. But guess what? They don't sit and think, oh my, I smell spaghetti sauce. And every time Mom cooks spaghetti sauce, I would get, I remember getting beat on those nights. That's not how it works. It's just the smell that they don't even think, spaghetti sauce. They go into bad memory. It just happens. And then they have a very strong emotional reaction that leads to a very intense behavior. That's what we see. We see the behavior. We don't see the whole thing happen in their brain, right? We just see oh my gosh, this kid is in total meltdown right now. And that's what we're going to, toward the end of this, I'll talk about what you can and can't, what's good to do and not great to do during those moments. So next slide, please. So this is just some things that give our kids those trauma responses. We have to think of when you see kids, there's that E again in the circle. What is up with that? I think response has a new spelling, and we just found out. I don't know. So these are very common things for them, again, that they don't think of. But when we see a kid in a behavior and erupting, so to speak, or really in a difficult time, we need to think as adults, all five senses, right? What smells are going on, what sounds are going on, what sights are going on, what tactile stuff is going on, like what is going on in this kid's sensory world, and pay attention to it. Most likely you're not going to know that first time, but maybe it's every time you make spaghetti that you notice this kiddo has a meltdown and you're like, there's something about this, right? Maybe it's the smell, maybe it's the sight, whatever it is, but pay attention to that. Pay attention to all the senses around you when you see a kid in that heightened state. What time of day is it? Most common trigger times for our kids are bedtime and bath time. A lot of our kids experience abuse around bath time, especially sexualized abuse. An estimated 80% of kids in the foster care system have been sexually abused, but many do not report until they're adults or actually disclose that. So that's why it's an estimate, which means you're not going to know a lot of times. So you have to, but if you see that around bedtime, if you see that around bath time, that's a clue that, something happened to this kiddo around that time of day. The time of year, changes of seasons, Christmas time, holidays, those certain events that are time of years. Maybe every fall your kiddo or the child that you're working with has that just really goes through this rough patch. Maybe it's that transition back to school. Our kids have a tough time with change. Once they finally get into the groove of school, like, hey, all right, we got this. And then it's like, oh yeah, summer break. What? Most kids love summer break. Our kids have a hard time sometimes transitioning out of that. Then they get used to summer and it's, okay, back to school. And then here we go again. So changes are hard for them. So you'll see the times of year affect them. And then anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, the anniversary around the time of year that they were removed from their home is often a big trigger date for our kids. So when you see kids with behaviors, ask yourself those. I say write it down, because I don't know about you guys, but as I get older, my memory is not what it used to be. So I have to write stuff down because I think like, I'll remember that, and I don't ever. So write it down if you see it, like what was going on in your environment at that moment. And then, like I said, think of all those areas that are up on the screen. Next slide, please. So this self-regulation is what happens in a non-traumatized brain. We all are born with a fight, flight, or freeze system, right? It's a great thing that keeps us safe. As human beings, we assess situations, and if we perceive a threat of danger, our fight, flight, or freeze kicks in, right? And our bodies decide at that moment, what are we gonna do? We're gonna fight our way out of it, we're gonna freeze, or we're gonna get the heck out of there and run. So when that happens, when we have that trauma trigger, so to speak, or that situation that makes us on a heightened state of awareness, we go into that. But then once that perceived threat is gone, or we've done whatever we have to, maybe we're walking down the road and we sense like there's some people we don't know, a group of, people that we don't know. We're in a neighborhood, we're alone. Maybe we think, this probably isn't the safest situation. So our fight, flight, or freeze kicks in, and maybe we cross the street, or maybe we go to a well-lit area, whatever it is. But then guess what? Our brain returns to normal. That's what happens, is we go back to a calm state of being. Threat's gone, we're calm. That's not how it works with our kids because of toxic stress. Good job, Tim. I didn't even have to say it. He's on it. So they live in that heightened state. We call it the on. Their switch is always on. Like our switch goes on when we need it to go on, and it returns to normal. With our kids, it's always on. So they are in a very heightened state of arousal most of the time, and they don't know how to come back down to normal. So when they have and they perceive things as threats that really we may be like, what? That's not a threat. Like, what's going on here? When we don't even recognize that something in the environment they're perceiving as a threat because they live in that heightened state of arousal. That's a direct result of living in toxic stress, because in the beginning, their brain is going like, okay, heightened state of arousal, and then back to normal. But after so many times of going up there, it stays up there. And then their brain is constantly being flooded with those hormones, and it stays on, and it overwhelms their coping skills. So they show us behaviors. That's exactly what they do. And that's what we see, is they're in that on position much longer than the person without trauma would be. They're living up there. So those temper tantrums, and it's not uncommon for me to talk to a foster caregiver and say, he tantrums or she tantrums for 2 hours. It's 2 hours. And I'm like, yep, they're living up there. They don't know how. Their brain doesn't know how, hasn't learned how to get back to a calm state of being. And it's not as simple as saying, you're safe. It's okay. There's no threat here. They have to get there on their own through repeatedly being in an environment that is safe. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So next slide, please. So here's a big one. And I think we're getting better about this, but when kids are in behaviors, when they have behaviors, what do we say? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with that kid, right? Isn't that what we say? Unfortunately, here's what we want you to say. What happened to you? What has happened to you to make you have that behavior or that response? Because what we know is that our kids' behaviors are the best clue we're going to get to their trauma. So asking yourself, what does this behavior tell me about the trauma this kid has had, is huge. In that moment, you need to deal with the behavior, of course, which we're going to talk about, but reflecting on it and saying, what did that tell me? And going back to those five senses, what did we see? What was going on? What did it tell me about the trauma of this kid? Because that's the best clue we're going to get sometimes. After kids, we have this term called felt safety. And felt safety is when a child feels not only physically safe, but emotionally safe. And that's what we ask our foster parents to do. Please make our kids have a sense of felt safety. It's not enough to say, you're safe here. You're safe here. They have to feel it. So when they come into foster care, first of all, they're going into a stranger's home, right? So again, number one trauma they face is that trauma of removal, the whole process. But then it's important to use the word safe in your language. So although I say it's not enough to say, you're safe here, you're going to be safe, we do encourage our foster caregivers to use the word safe a lot. For example, we have this, do you guys remember your safety script from pre-service? This is a safe place, and because this is, yeah, go ahead, say it. I'm impressed that you got that far. I won't let anyone hit you. So here's the safe. You got it. That's it. So here's how it goes. And it sounds hokey, but it's based on brain science, and it works. This is a safe place, and because this is a safe place, I won't let anyone hit you, hurt you, lie to you. So I can't let you lie to anyone, hit anyone, because this is a safe place. It's supposed to be said exactly like it's there. Carol Hutchins Miller and some other lady who's, That's right. An expectation with safety, yeah. Behavior to safety, that's what it does. It plays on the brain in a way that reinforces safety. So that's one way that we say help our kids feel safe. And it's something you guys can use too. If you're working with them, you can say, this is a safe place. Like, say that you have a kid who's hitting another kid. This is a safe place. And because this is a safe place, we won't let anyone hit you, but we can't let you hit anyone else because this is a safe place. It's very powerful. I should have put it in the PowerPoint. Sorry, I did not. But there you go. Jordan remembers it now, so he's typing it. I see it. So that's safety. The other thing is saying things such as, I'm a foster caregiver because I take the safety of children or I volunteer to watch children because I care about the safety of children, and I take my job very seriously, and I'm here to help keep you safe. Using the word safety is important with our kids. The more they hear it, the more it gets in there like, okay, I'm safe here, right? Do you think they heard it at home? Probably not. They probably didn't. They were in survival mode. So very slim probability that someone was saying, you're safe here, right? Instead, they were being taught maladaptive coping skills, such as when a caseworker comes, you lie. You make sure you say A, B, and C, or you dare say A, B, and C, or the consequences, they will take you somewhere else, right? And our kids don't want to. Even though what's going on there may be unsafe, they don't want to leave their homes. So they're taught to lie, right? They're taught that is a behavior that helps keep you in your home, and there's a positive reward for it. Many of our kids are caught to steal because we go to the store, we don't have resources, and guess what? Or not even taught to. I can't tell you how many cases I've been on where we get called because kids leave, little kids leave their homes and find their way to a store because they're starving, and they go and they shoplift food. And it's because that's their survival skill. So then what do you think they do in your home, right? Maybe they're with you and, something went in their pocket, and you're freaking out like, you can't do that. I challenge you to say, why? What does that behavior tell us about their trauma? So there's a lot of very maladaptive. Maybe every time there was a domestic violence episode in the home, maybe the kiddo took Benny the dog and got the heck out of there and went for 2 hours and was missing, but did anyone really miss him? No, because they were engaged in their domestic violence argument. And then that's how he protected himself. So maybe going out without permission and scaring the heck out of all of us because they just walk out the door and go somewhere is a maladaptive coping skill that worked for them. So many of the coping skills that you see are because they worked for them in a previous experience in their birth home. Next, please. So asking what happened to you. So I wanted to go over some common trauma experiences for children in foster care. So what do our kids deal with? And of course, many of these are common sense to you, but just to cover them a little bit. Emotional abuse. It's hard to prove. That is our hardest type of abuse to prove, but it's there, and it's usually combined with the physical abuse, the sexual abuse. Emotional is usually a component of that, and it's very powerful. I've heard kids say, usually older kids reflecting, that I really wish they would have just beat me instead of saying what they said to me. Like almost like, get it over with. I'd rather take the punch than hear the things I had to hear and be put down the way I was put down. So that emotional abuse, it gets in your head. And then our kids, do you think they have high self-esteem? No, they don't. They don't believe in themselves. They have a hard time with believing in anyone, let alone themselves. Physical abuse is something, of course, we commonly see. Like I said, estimated 80% of kids in foster care have been sexually abused. Physical neglect. Those cases are often, they're sad. They're all sad, but what really, when kids are neglected, and it's because of a parent's, like if there's a deficit, a cognitive disability among the parents, and they just aren't able to meet those needs. Those cases are absolutely heartbreaking. When there's no, we had this one case, it was this set of twin boys, and the mom was very developmentally delayed, and she had these twin boys. They came into foster care, and she just couldn't care for them. She didn't know how. She truly did not know how, and had no supports to be able to parent them. So they went to the foster home, who ended up adopting them. She signed her rights on them. And I remember sitting at the court hearing and our judge saying to mom, who's very compassionate, our magistrate, and he said, I'm so sorry. This must be one of the hardest days of your life. And she said, this is the happiest day of my life. And we all are like, what? Right? To this birth mom, like, what do you mean? And she said, I know they're going to have a life I could never give them, and I'm really happy for that. And of course, we're all like doing the ugly face cry because it was so sad. But then they've kept her involved. But those are I mean, it's not always drugs. It's not always mental illness. Sometimes it is to no fault of anyone's. Then we do have dependency cases, which aren't up there, but that's when things happen like homelessness, and that there's no abuse or neglect, but the children are dependent on us. Those are also when parents have teenagers and say, I can't do this anymore. I'm not abusing them, and I'm neglecting them, but I cannot handle their behaviors anymore. I have to, sign them over. So that's not up there, but those are there. Substance abuse is something I'm sure we're well aware of around here. That I think the misconception is that the opiate epidemic is over or has subsided some because of COVID. COVID took over the media. The opiate epidemic got worse during COVID. And we just sat through a training last week, which was phenomenal. But they said they predict the numbers for 2020 overdoses when they come out, because they lag behind a little bit, will be the worst ever, because people were stuck at home, addiction got worse, mental illness got worse, so it didn't go anywhere. It's still very much here. But we are seeing a rise in cocaine and meth cases around here. So, and the thought behind that is that people are scared to death of fentanyl because so many people are overdosing on it that unfortunately they're switching drugs. Incarceration of a family member is not uncommon with our families. In and out of jail a lot is more common than like the long prison stays that we think of when we think of incarceration. Loss of a parent, temporary or permanently. So when kids come into care, has anyone ever heard the term ambiguous loss? Ambiguous loss is grieving the loss of something that is not permanently gone. So our kids live in a state of ambiguous loss. But with that comes grief and loss. The 5 stages. Hold on, let me get this. Denial, anger, sadness, acceptance, they're not in the right order, and bargaining. Thank you. Yeah, it actually goes shock, denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, acceptance, something like that. Anyway, they don't go in order when you feel them, so we're all right. But our kids go through those emotions. So sometimes when you see those emotions and kids are just really angry, they're grieving. They're grieving the loss of family members who are still alive, but they're lost to them at that moment. So that's a powerful thing that we see with our kids. Mental illness, we see a lot. Mental illness and addiction go hand in hand, undoubtedly. Witnessing domestic violence is big in our kids. And what we know and what I see undoubtedly is that our kids who are exposed to domestic violence are aggressive. They learn. That's how they learn that you behave and interact with people. So they're often very aggressive. Separation from siblings. This one breaks my heart. I'm a big sibling person. Because when kids come into foster care, if they can be kept with their siblings, it really minimizes the trauma at that moment, because at least I have you next to me, right? And we're in this together. But when they get removed and then they have to be split, can't even fathom it. I can't wrap my brain around what that does to them. So we try really, really hard to keep our siblings together. Placement out of the home, like we said, number one trauma they face. Prenatal traumas. That's important to think about and talk about. There's this misconception that kids who are taken right from the hospital, who are placed at birth, don't have trauma, right? They've always been in a foster home, a good foster home, and so they're okay. There is absolutely trauma. Often had prenatal traumas, drug exposure sometimes. Sometimes we just had a safe haven baby come in whose mom attempted to abort her 3 times. 3 times. Right? Is that trauma? Absolutely. Plus the feelings of, I don't want you in my tummy. What am I going to do? That's stress. Think about all the stress that mom went through during that pregnancy. The baby feels that. Even our babies know our voices, right? If you had given birth to a child, does that child know your voice when he or she hears it? They don't get that. They don't have that. Like, where's that voice? That's trauma. In addition to that, they have the psychological presence of their parent always with them. So our kids that grow up outside of their family of origin, always, because it's clearly what's in kids' best interest that they always know they're adopted. If they're in an adopted family, that you're adopted. We love you. You're part of our family. This is your story. You're entitled. We're all entitled to our story, right? So knowing that, but that comes with a psychological presence, and then well, why didn't my parents want me? What was wrong with me? Those kinds of things. That's trauma, and it's important not to minimize that. Then multiple moves. The average child in foster care has 3 moves while they're in foster care. So we don't like that. We want it to be one move, and then if they have to, we end up in permanent custody and they're adopted, hopefully by that same family. So that's a list of some common traumas that our kids in foster care see. Next slide, please. So when you are working with our kids, what are some good do's and don'ts? So do, and I said this before, ask yourself what that behavior tells you about that child's trauma. That's the number one thing you can do. It's going to be something you have to reflect on. It's not going to be, if you're dealing with a child who is throwing themselves all over the floor, you're not going to really be able to sit there and be like, well, what's this tell me about this trauma? No, that's not the time, but you need think that because it's going to help you in the future, because you see these kids more than once, right? You're with them more than once. You want to model the behavior you want to see from the child. So if you want that child in a calm state, do you think it helps to do this? You need to calm down right now, right? It doesn't help. But I see that all the time. Listen, I have twin boys, and it's so funny when you said, are your kids different? My dad will say the only thing the same about my twins are their last name, because they are night and day. And I catch myself saying to them, would you calm down? And then I think, like, really? I train on this stuff. And I'm telling my kids, like, what's wrong with you? Or we're human beings, or I'll be like, oh, this morning, oh my gosh, Anthony. I wouldn't change a thing about him, but oh my gosh, why can't he just get ready for school? Why? Why do I have to tell them 18 times every morning? So then my voice ups the ante, and I'm like, I know this doesn't work. Why am I doing this? But anyway, so we're not perfect. It's okay. We get it. Like, you're going to get frustrated, but think about bringing yourself down. There's this really, and I can't find her. I was going to put one of her YouTube videos in this presentation, and she's gone from YouTube. I don't know what happened. But she does this thing about modeling, and that if you feel yourself wanting to go up here and be like, oh my gosh, then challenge yourself to do the opposite and bring it down to a whisper. And guess what? Sometimes the kids will follow you because they want to hear what you're saying. So if you whisper, if you're loud, they don't have to guess what you're saying because they're going to hear it, and they're just going to be like, I'm going to keep right on going. So, and don't forget, they live in a high arousal state. So they're not coming down quickly. Expect that. Don't expect our kids to come down quickly because they're not going to. Your tone of voice. So modeling what you want to see, tone of voice, your posture, your body posture. Keep it relaxed. If that's what you want to see for them, get on their level. If they're on the floor, sit on the floor. What's wrong with that? Just sit with them and just be there. You don't have to say anything sometimes. Just being a calm presence and letting them know you're there is sometimes exactly what they need. Maybe they're not used to it, and maybe they'll be like, I don't know quite what to do with this, right? And sometimes that calms them down just because they feel that calm energy coming from you. Positive affirmations, right? Our kids are used to hearing what they do wrong. They are. You need to calm down right now. You need to knock it off. And maybe in their birth home, you're nothing but, and bad names and beep, beep, beeps and all that stuff, and it's not okay. They're really throwing off sometimes by being told, okay, you're doing a good job. All right, let it out. You know what? It's okay. It's okay to be angry. You're allowed. You know, I've even said to kids, I'd be angry too. It's all right. You have every right to be. Take your time. Give them permission to take their time to get it out. And that will often help them get through it actually a little quicker if you give them permission, which is allowing the child to work through the behavior. This should be up at the top now that I'm thinking about it, but you want to ensure safety of anyone else in the vicinity first. If you have a child that's very aggressive, he's a hitter, he's a thrower, then clear, for two reasons. First, safety, but clear the audience. Our kids don't need an audience. They need a one-on-one intention, or if it's two-on-one to maintain safety, whatever it takes, they need the minimum amount of people there. They do not need 5 adults and 3 children going, shh, it's okay. No, they need just really to feel the presence of one supportive relationship, one supportive adult. So here's what you don't want to do. Don't raise your voice. Don't do it. I just said I do it sometimes. I do. It happens, but you really challenge yourself not to. Do not stand in a position of power over a child. You know, if you're going to be working with kids and volunteering, you know, look nice, but wear something that's comfortable enough to get on the floor and know that, like, I might be on the floor with these kids today because if he's having a meltdown, I can be there. Touching our kids is a whole other Oprah show that I'm not going to totally get into, but I'll just say this. Whenever you touch our kids, please ask permission, because they've been taught at a very early age that they don't have control over their bodies and that people are going to touch them and do things to them that they don't give permission for and have no say-so over. The number one thing that you can do in interacting with our children that shows them that you have respect and that they have some control is even saying, is it okay if I sit next to you, right? Or if you're sitting, is this too close? Are we good? How about this? Can I get a fist bump? Can I get a high five? Don't just go in for the hug. You may want it in the worst way, right? I love hugs from kids, but yeah, our kids. And I practice that with my boys like that I've taught so teach other people in your world. Before you ever hug or touch these kids, please ask them. And if they say no, don't push it. I mean, my grandma, oh my gosh, we all have the grandma. Like, you almost want to say you got to listen, it's a rule, but give grandma a hug, please. Please hug. But you can't. Like, it's got to be across the board. And the more that you can tell your other people in these kids' world that, the more they will learn this world's safe. And people here respect me and care about my feelings, and I have some control in this world. They come from a world with no control. Giving them little bits of control is huge. And then there are times you have to touch them for safety reasons. So if you have to, for example, if you're crossing the street, here's what you need to say. Don't just grab their hand. Say, listen, it's my job to keep you safe, and I've told you, I take that job really serious. So in order to keep you safe, I need to hold your hand to get across the street. So is it okay if I grab your hand now to keep you safe? How many times did I use the word safe, right? You're reinforcing safety always, always. And it'll be fine. Bath time, this would be more for foster caregivers, not people just watching kids at church. But if you are in a position where you're giving kids baths and they've been in the system, or they've had trauma, letting them know exactly if they're not able to bathe themselves, this is what I'm doing. It's to keep you clean, and then give them the opportunity to learn as quickly as they can to do it themselves. But always letting them know that this is why I'm doing it. This is exactly what I'm going to be doing, and that's it. And it is for the purpose of cleanliness. It's important for our kids. And then never threaten discipline. Never. They don't care. Guess what? Bring it on. What can you do to me that hasn't been done to me? That's really where they kind of go with it. It's if I say, if you don't knock it off right now, I'm gonna, what? What are you gonna do? Right? It doesn't work with our kids. What does work is positive discipline. Because we forget that discipline just means to teach. So when I still hear discipline and think negative. I think a lot of us do. But discipline just means to teach. So if you discipline in a positive manner, saying, you know what, when we're all calm again, when everyone's safe again, because you're using the word safe, how about if you pick out a toy that you really want to play with? When they're calm enough to hear that. If you say that when they're way up here, it ain't working. But if they're getting calmer and you're giving them positive affirmations, hey, you're doing a really good job calming down. I'm right here with you, not going anywhere. And when you get calm, I think you get to pick out a toy, any toy you want, be keeping it very calm. That's the kind of stuff that our kids are like, what? This person's going to reward me for having, like, what? But it'll click. After that interaction over and over again, it'll click that, wait, it's because I had control over my behaviors and learned to do it that way. So those kinds of things. Discipline doesn't work with our kids. It really doesn't. When I do pre-service training for foster parents coming through, and one of the things that is really difficult to understand until you've experienced it is that parenting a child with trauma is a different ball game than parenting a child without it. It is. It's night and day. It changes our kids' brains. That's why Dr. Perry does brain mapping, is because it changes their brains. It doesn't just like here, and this is actually a good one too. Trauma affects the part of the brain that has feeling recognition. So there's two reasons our kids don't really do well with expressing feelings. Number one is trauma damages that part of the brain. But think about how we learn our feelings. If we have a nurturing parent when we're a baby and we smile, what is our, how many people, oh my gosh, look, you're so happy. Oh my gosh, you're smiling, right? And we learn that, oh, this means happy. And if we start to whimper and cry and oh my gosh, no, don't be sad. And we learn that means sad. Our kids don't come from that world. So that combined means they don't always know what feelings they're having. So if you say to them, tell me how you're feeling, you're probably not going to get a whole lot back. Here's a great tool. You know those face sheets with the feelings, with all the different feelings? I encourage every foster home to have one. Just say you can print them offline. They have all the different faces with the feelings, that frustrated, yeah, like the pain charts, except there's like 30 different feelings. Those are great tools to help our kids. Show me the face of how you're feeling, because that will help them more than being able to express the word they can't. really can't do it. They don't have the ability a lot of times. So we have to teach them and help them with that. So is there a next slide? I don't think there is. No, that was my last slide. So that being said, we'll just open it up to questions.
I want to repeat it here so it gets captured in the video. Great question. If they're new to us, at what point do we go, like in the service even, in this, to go get their foster family? Because maybe our prior protocol might be 20 minutes or something. I don't know. Michelle and Christine could help me with that one. But maybe someone's having a hard day. How long do we typically let them go before we put the number on the screen? So let's say, what would you say for a child that we know? This is a foster child who maybe just came into care. So it isn't the same because they have all that prior trauma.
If they just came into care, then the foster family is probably not going to be able to gauge it yet, because my first response was ask the family what they think, because they would know that child best. So I would say when they're newer to you, I would get the family sooner, because they're establishing that safety and that these are my safe people. So I still think 10 minutes is okay. I wouldn't go 20 when they're new, and then as they become familiar, I would go longer, because I really think that the fact that you're going 20 minutes is a good thing, because it gives you time. Because remember, our kids live up here. They don't, they're not going to calm quickly. So if you're sitting with them, if you're seeing progress, I guess that's what a good gauge is. If you're seeing progress, if you're doing those steps, if you're calm with them, if you're reassuring, if you're doing positive affirmations and it's making progress, then you're good. But if it's not, I'd say with a new child at 10 minutes at the most, I'd go get the family so they can see, like, these are my safe people. So, but you don't want to take away from you being the safe people either.
This is just random. We were at a church, I don't know how long ago, but they actually just took our number and they could text us too. So maybe in addition to what we're doing now, we could always like add that as a backup or something. But maybe
I'm going to grab a water real quick.
Yeah. Another question. So for the video, I want to capture a summary of the question. There's disturbance in the room, and even if they're 3 or 5 years old and it's ongoing, what are some maybe talk-down measures, de-escalation measures?
You said they would come get you. Are you a safe person for that child? There you go.
When we don't know what to do, we get Noelle, pretty much.
There we go.
I do that, and I'm the pastor.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. What you said that was very smart is remove that child from an audience and do a one-on-one with someone who would be the safety person. So if you have a child like that, establishing who a safety person is probably a good idea. So when that child then learns, when this person comes, this is my safe time. I need to, be with this person, and we calm together, and then keep it again. No threats. You're just, hey, let's work through this, girl. I'm here. We got this. And just being with that child and letting her work through whatever she's going through.
She did everything wrong.
Is it your daughter?
That's her daughter on the right, yeah. Well, let me ask a question that was down. It's down here on mine that's connected to that, so I want to ask it now. And it was going to be more of an internal question, but since you're here, I know you can't see our Kinsman building, and I know we're in this building.
No, I was there just a minute ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Not my fault, by the way. I want you to know.
It's not. It's
Throw
my
her
life.
under the bus. No, I'm kidding. It's like, oh, it's okay. It's this way. All right. Our room, when you said that earlier about removing the crowd, I thought, man, we have like outside, and because I'm thinking I'm the campus pastor for Kinsman, so I'm going. We have offices right outside their main room for RSK. We have here a cafe, a little tiny meeting room. What are some ideal? Like, is an office with windows? I mean, is there certain things that would be like, okay, don't go in this kind of room, or maybe create a room, or put up should we even consider like, maybe like I don't know, just thinking out loud. Because I'm just picturing us doing that, and I don't know if we have an adequate place right now.
Could you put an office that is soothing, that is calming,
That's exactly what I'm
that has like a, maybe even a quiet sound machine, that has soft furniture, not throwable, dangerous objects. Like
Yeah.
legit, like when you plan that room, you think of this is our safety room. This is where we're gonna take kids who just need to chill and get. Yeah, I think that would be the best bet. It doesn't have to be. I mean, clearing.
So
the
my
room,
office has less sword on a desk. We should avoid that.
Yeah.
Just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Let's process that more with the team. Like a nice
sensory
safe,
issues.
Sensory things. Yeah.
That's a lot of our kids have sensory issues. A lot. So thinking about tactile stuff is important. So are there, and fidgety stuff, even like, those poppy things and all those things that they can have, having those available too will help some of our kids with sensory issues get those. Do you ever, the kids that like jump really hard, or they're just like, they like or they'll come up and squeeze you, those hard hugs, and they're real rough. Those are often because of sensory issues, that they crave that, like jumping off furniture and landing really hard. It meets that sensory need. So sometimes like having brushes that they can brush down their arm. Like there's a bunch of stuff out there. Weighted blankets, those help. So you might want to put some of those in that
I'm trying
room.
to refrain from making jokes. I have a couple adults that do that to me at Kinsman campus. So I want to see if you could help me with that.
They might have sensory issues. They
Personal
can get
space.
weighted blankets.
Okay.
That's cool.
No. I have a bunch of questions on my phone, but I know you guys got some more. This is really good information, isn't it? It's going to be really helpful to us. We're going to try to do this maybe twice a year more. Yeah. Like de-escalating a violent child, whether they're 8 or they could be 13 in the youth group. But remember, mentally, they're 7.
Yeah. Again, establish safety first and foremost. Keep everyone else safe. So getting that child out of that room is the best thing you could have done. And then giving them a safe place. There's not.
And when you get them out of the room, can we even go further into that?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not grabbing their hand, right? We're asking.
You should always.
Can we go? Yeah, hey, can we go?
We need
into this other room together to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, and our kids are. It's not always clean cut. I mean, there's gonna be times where it's gonna be 3 adults, and it's this kid that, oh my gosh, what do we do with this? And then there may be times where you do have to clear the room out because that child is not leaving that room and continues to be destructive. I would just go back to what's going on. What are, in hindsight, trying to figure out like what triggered that child, what is triggering that child, and then really just giving them, asking children of a certain age, what calms you? What do you love to do? Maybe there is a certain video or a certain thing they watch that you could have on like a device that helps calm them right away. Because if it's about establishing safety, then I mean, I know with we're not big screen people. We like to be outside, and we don't like our kids in front of screens. But when it's about safety, it's about safety. It's then okay if Bluey, the cartoon Bluey, helps them
maybe
calm.
we could even ask the parents.
Right.
What are some calm down measures you use?
Yep. Yeah. So, but whenever there's a safety issue, you either clear the room. Ideally, ask them to leave the room. But if not, you find a way to clear the room of all the other kids so that they can be safe.
Very good question.
What else?
Might be another 4 or 6 months before we have her back, so I want you to ask your questions now. All right, I've got a few.
Okay.
One of the things you said, and I heard you say this in our training too, is about meaningful connections and how important that is. How can we create meaningful connections as youth workers, RSK, which is Rock Solid Kids, and we only have 2 hours? So I know like the trust thing is going to undoubtedly be built over time, consistent love and trust over time. Yeah. But are there just, I don't know, some advice you could give us for, hey, here's some really basic, simple ways to build some meaningful connections.
When you see those kids, get eye to eye with them, ask them for a fist bump, let them know like, hey, dude, I'm here. Keep you safe. What do you need today? What do you want to do today? How really engaging with them. I mean, if you really talk to kids and really get into engage with play with them, they love it. And you can learn a lot through kids by playing with, or about kids through playing with them. Our kids will often act out and play what they've gone through. So that's a big thing too. But just getting down on their level, they're going to connect with anyone. They're like, hey, this person, not meaningful connect all the time, but they're going to give be more drawn to the people who are not just like, hey, buddy, pat on the head, but getting down and saying, hey, I'm so happy to see you today. I'm so glad you're here. And then like engaging in conversation, like, tell me about your week. What are you excited about? Oh my gosh, how was your soccer game? Like, wow, this big person's asking me questions. Kids will be drawn to those people, and then you start, and then it builds that meaningful connection. They know the adults that are just like, yeah, okay, go. Like, that's what, and sometimes we're just busy, and that's okay. But when you're the adult that consistently greets them and gets down and is excited to see them and asks permission to touch them and has that, always say, use that safety script. Hang it on the wall if you can.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Works.
It'll be maybe in our future training, for the workers.
I should have put that in there. But yeah, using the safety script, all of that, I think helps them build those meaningful. It will take time. Our kids don't trust. They don't trust. And they'll test you. They're going to test to see, okay, you're nice to me every week. Well, guess what? I'm going to give you a run for your money this week, and we'll see how nice you are. And if you're still there, guess what? You've just broken through a little bit. So, because again, it's about felt safety. It's not enough. We tell our kids, we're going to take you to a home where you're going to be safe. It's about that emotional feeling of safety that they need. That's when they start to heal from trauma. Once they've established felt safety, emotional, physical safety, that's when the healing starts.
And I want to reiterate, guys, that's going to take time.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
You might be really tired of working with that 13-year-old, and you know what? It's, honey, it's been 2 months, and I can't get through to him. Let's give it another 2 months. Ask God. Say, God, just get me through this next Wednesday. Get me through this next Wednesday. And suddenly now you're like, man, you're praying for that child. You're praying for that teenager. Now you're really loving that child. Now you're getting a supernatural grace for that child. And it might be 6 months. It might be a year. Now they're like, man, I can actually trust Jason. I haven't made, everybody else broke their promise. I wore him down. Yeah. But Jason, he still loves me.
Don't make promises you can't keep to any child. But also, once you make it, once it comes out of your mouth, please do everything you can to keep that promise, because they'll remember. Yeah. So if you can't promise it, then don't ever start with, I promise you. Don't say, I promise you I'll keep you safe, because you can't. Like we tell our homes, don't say, I promise that while you're here, no one will hurt you, because that's not a promise you can keep. You can't guarantee that. So only things that, you can say, I'll do my best. Right. My job is to keep you safe, and I take that very seriously. But when it starts with, I promise, and it's broken, it's just yet another thing.
Because they've already had all these promises broken.
That's right.
All right, so I know, like in service and in tonight, that there's this mention of triggers that creates, it's linked to a memory, strong emotions build. Yeah. Are there common triggers that we can just all say, we should avoid that? Because it's like, man, all these years in foster care, there's a few here that,
bathroom trips
very
can
common.
Be triggers. I mean, every kid needs to use the potty, right? So those can be triggers for our kids. Besides, it's so hard to tell with our kids what is going to be a trigger. Yeah, loud voices are triggers for our kids. Yelling.
So a lot of those things, it's like we've already taught in kind of our training is keeping calm, keeping kind, not yelling,
Yeah, absolutely. The rest you kind of just have to figure out as you go. What's a trigger for each kid?
So this is a similar question. Are there some basic things we can avoid doing to trigger an emotion from possibly a sexual abuse or any abuse? Is there some things? I know you said don't touch, but
always asking before you touch. Never assuming that you can give a hug. I think that's the biggest thing. And certainly if you have to change a diaper, if you do have to help them use the restroom, that you explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then that's it. In and out. It's you don't do any more than that, and you're done. So that, and you always explain it. Don't ever just say, or just go ahead and wipe them without telling them, because our kids need to know what's coming, and then they learn to trust you through that too. It's like, okay, they said this is what's going to happen. It's what happened. That's all that happened. Okay, we're good. Right. But that's a big trigger time for our kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
I would only do that if you are certain you can do it and not get hurt, and because that's with a teenager, I mean, they're strong, so you don't want to put your own safety at risk. It'd be better to clear the room if you could, and then bring in reinforcements as far as someone to help the adults. So our teenagers are tough. I mean, they've been through years of trauma. So when they let go sometimes. And it's a lot harder to gain their trust and to have them understand that. So with them, getting them to a calm state and then kind of talking about what happened with them is easier because they can process a little bit more. But yeah, I wish there were a foolproof, here's 1, 2, 3 steps that you do. It's always establish safety first, and then what for everyone else and that child, clear of an audience.
And when you say clear the room, it is counterintuitive because we might think, well, the whole youth group's in here. So we think we have to get you out and we're going to kind of manhandle you out if he's getting, well, I think correct me if I'm wrong. Let's say they're right there where Jeremiah is. It's actually wiser to turn around, give a cue to Missy and Jason and Jen and whoever's in here to say, hey kids, we're all going to go out to the basketball courts, right? And then let the leaders just take the crew out. And you just kind of maybe turn your posture to leave the kid in here.
Yeah, and for a few reasons, because if you try to forcefully get them out, they've become the center of attention. So they're going right back into fight, flight, and fight. But you know what I'm talking about.
Freeze,
even more.
flight,
yeah, they're up here. And
by the way, she already taught all day. So one more time to give her a hand because
right.
I don't know how she's even doing this right now.
I'm good. Thank you very much. I think what that shows them is that my attention is still here with you. My goal is to keep you safe. I'm here for you. Where if you get them out, you're the problem. It's reinforcing what they already believe is that, oh, I'm the bad person. I'm the bad kid. I got to get out of here. Where if everyone else just leaves, and it's a great idea to have a cue of, okay, guys, here's our code. If this code happens, everyone get out of this room so I can have some time with this person. But I would also have a cue of, I need one more person.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yep. I was just going to say, like, hey, Jason.
Yeah, you might want to not be left alone. So I do think it's better to clear the room because that sends a message that, like, we're here for you. Our focus is you, not that you get out of here because you're bad, because that's their belief system.
You know what I just remembered, and I found out later he was a foster child. Mm-hmm. I was a youth pastor. We were about 4 years into youth pastoring, and we lost this kid in Cleveland because he wandered off. Ooh. And he was new, and everybody had a room leader.
Parent?
Everybody, yeah. No, listen. Everybody had a leader. Every 4 kids had their room leader, and everybody, And this young man was new, and he went on the trip. He had already had a couple moments, and I remember talking with Dave Morris at the time, who was always with him on the trips, like, hey, let's really keep a close eye, because he had already just said a few things that were a little different. Well, we're all in the conference, and like literally bleacher-type seats, and I'm looking down like every 5 minutes I'm looking, because I just know something's going to happen in this. I look, and next thing, he's gone. Like, he's disappeared. And I said, Dave, I'll be right back. I go. Then I had to send Dave. Guess where we found him?
Where?
25 minutes later, walking through Cleveland.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, when I got home, I tell the story for a reason, because when I got back, I found out he was a foster child. Mm-hmm. And this was like his 4th or 5th placement. So this was way before we had any sort of movement in Rock of Grace. So what I want us to think through, I'm saying that so like Jeremiah, myself, and Christine, that we think through not labeling a child, but making sure a parent tells us beforehand. Because I remember thinking, I wish you would have, like, to the parents, I didn't say it, but I remember thinking when they told me, oh, yeah, we just got him a few months ago. I was thinking, you should have told me that. That would have given me context to make a little bit better decisions. So, I don't know, just let's think through that of, like, how do we get informed that they are a foster child without, obviously, any sort of labeling or anything, but.
Right. And to find out what trauma you can find out that they've had would help, right?
Did you have your hand up? Oh, you were just itching your head. Okay. Yes. So I'll repeat the question for the video, that there's kids who are in our service, worship services at church, who are foster kids. They're about to return home, be reunited with mom and dad. how do we transition that well? Say bye, but don't promise anything.
So if you can help, depending on their age and their level of language, how much language, what they understand about what's going on, being able to give them permission to, oh my gosh, we're so excited for you. We're going to miss you. You're a great kid. We're going to miss you like crazy, but we're so excited for you to go home. And it really depends. I would find out what conversation the foster caregivers have had with that child, because if they've said things like, it depends what language they use. Maybe it was, mom had some work to do when you came here, and now she's done it all, and now she's super excited for you to go home, or maybe it's grandma or whatever. But the more you can know, the more you can help give them permission to be happy about it. But also it's okay to say, like, we're going to really miss you. You're a great kid, and we're going to think about you all the time. But wow, how exciting for you, and build it up for them, because that's a scary time. There are behaviors when we transition kids, undoubtedly. They're going through yet another huge change. So you'll see that. During those times, you're going to see behaviors. But if you can be supportive and give them permission to be successful where they're going and happy about it, that's a great thing you can give them.
This is a really small, quick one, more of just a tip or a thought that crossed my mind while sitting there. Is how you guys told us that they're often forced to put all of their belongings in a garbage bag when they have to leave the house. So I want you to first of all think about how that makes them feel, because all their belongings have to go in a garbage bag because they got to get them out safely from this dangerous situation. What they might infer from that garbage. All this stuff is garbage. Maybe I'm garbage. So maybe as RSK and youth that we maybe avoid any games that would involve a big black garbage bag. Yeah. Right? Because maybe that would trigger that exact day that they were removed from mom and dad.
Good idea.
What other questions? And then I've got like 5 of the takeaways that I thought were really good to remember.
We have takeaways too, by the way.
Oh, nice. Physical takeaways? Do you want Jeremiah to pass them out while we get another question?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. That'd be great.
And there's brochures we actually have a mentoring program for our kids in our residential center. So anyone who wants, the commitment is 4 hours a month. That's it. Awesome. We match you up with a kiddo, and you hang out with them for 4 hours a month. And I can't tell you how many great relations. Our kids love their mentors because this is what they'll say. They want to spend time with me. They don't have to. Like, their perception is foster parents have to, right? Like, obviously foster parents do it because they want to, but they want to. They're like, these people just want to spend time with me, and they love it. And we've had adoptions. I can think of 5 that have resulted from a mentor relationship. It started. So if you are interested.
That's the program I've mentioned from the
great.
pulpit a few times. The mentoring thing, wow, significance in the life of a young person.
Yeah. And there's brochures, like I said, back there about the mentoring program for our residential kids. And we're looking to expand it to our kids in foster care also. So.
Any other,
Right. You do a background check, an orientation,
all
and
the
that's
hours
it.
of training.
Yep. You go over some policies. It's not nearly what we foster caregivers do. So it's quick and easy and painless, and you get to make a huge difference in the life of a kid and our older kids, and they deserve someone to put that time into them. So they've been through a lot.
Any other questions? This has been really good, hasn't it? I'm gonna jot down a few things real quick, or mention a few things I jotted down. Let's model the behavior you want to see. Where can we take a child? We already talked about that. Wear clothes that you can get on the floor with them. I think that might already be a policy, but don't touch them if at all, right? Like if you feel like you have, it's got to be permission. I wonder if there could be a form so parents can inform us if their child. I thought of that story when I wrote that. Never threaten discipline. Right? Maybe give options. Yeah. Instead of you can't, don't, or I will. It's more like, hey, what if we do this instead?
Perfect. Yep.
They don't always know what they're feeling. That was a big takeaway for me tonight. Yeah. Because I feel like I would just ask, right? Because I'm just like a verbal, like, tell me how you feel. How many guys that kind of surprised you? Because we would expect them to say, I'm sad or I'm angry. Well, based on what you're saying with trauma-informed care, they might not be able to
Right.
express
They'll get
that.
happy, sad, mad. That's the general 3 that we see.
Yeah.
But frustrated, confused,
Yeah.
not all those. No, you're not going to get them.
So maybe if not now, maybe talk with Jeremiah for a minute, the tall guy in the back, about, because the kids, I can see the face thing. I don't think I could give that to a 15-year-old. They're like, circle the emoji that best describes you. Like, I feel like that would just burn right in my face. That'd just be like, I'll give you an emoji. Oh,
yeah.
So
how about this?
So yeah, I'll give you an emoji. So can you maybe think through? And again, I feel like that's a longer answer. So can you chat with Jeremiah afterwards about how to help a teen assess his emotion and describe what he's feeling, so we can process and navigate them?
Here's.
Out of that,
Do you want me? Can I
go
give
for
it?
it. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Ask them how it feels in their stomach. What color? What color do you feel right now? Colors are a good gauge. When I used to do therapeutic work with kids, I would often say, tell me what color you feel right now. Red's mad, black's not good, lighter blue. Like and older kids will answer that because they're like, it's kind of neat. Or how's it feel in your stomach? Those are 2 good questions for older kids. So maybe do a color chart. I don't know, where they can just point to the color versus emojis.
And then I took a picture of the do's and don'ts, and we could, that was gold right there. So we'll print that, either PDF or just email it to y'all. But do you want to transition? Did you want to share anything before I know I told him 8:30, so you got 16 minutes. Actually, maybe 12 minutes.
I don't have a lot to say.
By the way, one more time, give her a hand. I almost called you Brooklyn. Brooklyn.
It is bright up here. Oh my God. Sorry. Of course, that would be the first thing I say. So I am actually very, very new to my job. I just started in June. I graduated with my master's in May, and thank you. Yes, it was a very long journey. But I actually have a very personal touch to all of this. The fact that I became a foster parent recruiter is kind of crazy because I was myself a foster child. My mom had all sorts of issues. That list of like trauma, yeah, it was all of it. But I went into foster care when I was 5. I moved a lot that whole I really don't remember even going to school until I got adopted. And I got adopted when I was 7, and we were a sibling group. They adopted all 3 of us. We were 5, 7, and 9 years old, which I now, as a mother myself, tell my mom she was nuts. We were girls, all 3 girls. I mean, I have 2 of them, and I cannot imagine. But it was a lot. Like, all of those things that she described that kids feel and deal with, I can say from a personal point of view that those things are very, very real. It's taken me a lot of therapy and a lot of meaningful connections to get where I'm at. I ended up in a domestic violence situation. I had an abusive husband. I mean, even my kids have now experienced trauma because of my own trauma. So the cycle did continue with me, but because of the things that I was able to build throughout life, which Dee Dee and I actually just had a conversation today, because I was like, where does resiliency come from? Like, how did I do that? And she was like, you were born that way. And I was like, well, lucky me, huh? But it's true, you know, I was able to overcome a lot of those things, but I was also not able to overcome everything, and I did fall into the same cycle that I saw as a kid, and I did end up with somebody who didn't treat me right and that put my kids through things that I would never have wanted to happen to my kids. But now I'm here, you know. I got divorced and became a single parent at 26. I moved back in with my parents and thought, well, I failed. I have done nothing except for bring these kids into this world and let exactly what happened to me happen to them. And I felt awful. I didn't know what I was going to do. I felt miserable. And my parents, the lovely, wonderful people that you all already know they are, they supported me. They brought me back home. They said, you got this. You'll figure it out. You'll get back on your feet. You'll be fine. And they were right, as they usually are, like my dad likes to remind me. And I did. I tried to go back to work. I tried to get jobs, did entry-level stuff. It was all awful. And I finally decided to go back to college. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I knew that I cared about people. And I knew that I wanted to be somebody who could make change and make impact. And talk about coming full circle. Somebody, a mentor of mine, one of those many meaningful connections in my life, sent me somehow she got the internal email from Trumbull County Children's Services, and she sent it to me. And she said, "This job is meant for you." And here I am. And I really hope that I can be the person who opens up people's hearts to these kids who are in our care who do need people in their lives to make meaningful connections with them. And although I am one of the lucky few that was adopted, that's not always the best option. And so many of these kids just need that momentary respite. And I know we use that word in foster care, but I mean it from like their everyday lives. Like, and it's not just them that needs you, it's their parents that need you. And although it's really hard to understand what those people are going through sometimes, because you look at these little faces and you're like, how could you? Why would you? How can you? But you have to realize they're humans too, and many of them have also experienced their own trauma, and they're dealing with it in not a healthy way. But if we can all work together as a community and be those people who help the kids and their families do better, then we all get better. The community gets better, and we all become better as a whole. So isn't that what we want, right? So that's my story.
Good job. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Oh, it's a great question. I want you to answer that on the mic because that sounds like a gold. It's going to be a great answer. The question was, as a foster child, what's one of the best ways, help me if I get this wrong, we can impact you in the right way? Just entering the building, right? Coming into worship service.
I think an important thing to remember is that sometimes too many people, too many faces is too much for these kids. And as much as we all want to love them, first of all, like for me, I didn't understand what love was anyways. I was scared of a lot of people because a lot of people had hurt me. So the funny thing is that I had never been to church until I got adopted. And that was one of the first things my mom did, was take us to church. And those people, those are a lot of my meaningful connections are from church. So honestly, keep doing what you're doing. I mean, there's not much that you are not already doing from what I hear. Just don't overwhelm them. You know, don't everybody, as soon as they walk in, oh, hi, how are you? Give me a, yeah. I mean, even Dee Dee said, like, don't just assume they want your hugs, because trust me, a lot of them don't. But yeah, just, you know, let them ease in. Because even like my daughter, she's just more of the reserved type of kid, and she's the loud one in our house. But every time I go to parent-teacher conferences, her teachers are like, she's so quiet and sweet and just sits there. And I'm like, you should check that paper. Kala, are we looking at Kala? And she's like, yeah. So, but what I've noticed with her even is that I just give her her own time to get used to people, because she's not a people person. So, and she'll warm up to you eventually, but you just got to give her time. And I feel like that's the best thing you can do for all of these kids, is kind of like see what they're going to do. Now, if they come running in and they're all smiley and they're waving, do the same thing. Match their energy. That's what I would say.
I feel like I have so many questions I know we don't have time for. We'll probably just save for next time. But like, we do events. I mean, we have trips where we'll take, there's like 4 events that the youth goes to every year. Convention and fine arts and a retreat. And it's like, I guarantee there's advice that you guys have just for going on a trip of what to do and what not to do. So maybe we'll save that one for next time. But yeah, can you guys give them a big hand? Awesome. Well, we're so glad you guys are here and you shared tonight, and we really do. We just believe every one of these kids, you know, like Jeremiah says, I knew you before you were born. He knows their name. He has a destiny on their life and beautiful gifts that he has given them. And we want to just love them well and show them God's love. So on your way out, can you guys make sure that you pick up some of that stuff there that they brought, because it's really good stuff. And consider mentoring. That would just. So let me pray. And God, I just thank you for tonight. I thank you for this opportunity to meet here tonight with Brooklyn and Dee Dee, and to hear some words of wisdom, God, from all of their training and experience. And God, we just thank you for them, and we just pray a blessing on them. God, I thank you for every one of those kids, Lord, that are in care. Lord, we just specifically lift them up. Lord, I know that you know their name, you know their personality. God, you know what keeps them awake at night, what they're maybe afraid of, what they're hoping for. And I just thank you that you can protect every single one of them. God, that you would even open up their heart, Lord, to just feel and to know this love that is coming through these parents, and also everybody in this room who is working in RSK, in the nursery, in toddlers, or in youth group. Father, I pray that you would give us wisdom. Give us wisdom, Lord, to handle each situation the way you would handle it. And God, that we would not just react maybe to the way we've always done, or do something the way we've always done it, but God, we would hear your Holy Spirit, and we would remember a lot of these advice given to us tonight, God, so we could love these kids and see them mature and grow and just become amazing people who love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thanks, guys.